It's time to remind people what good this band has done and why I have every right, as most other people do, in the disappointment that we've been given. And what better way to do it than to talk about two albums in particular. Starting with Skillet's Collide. Now, alright, here's the thing. The band has needed to work on the songwriting. They've had that for a while, and yes, I'm not just saying, oh, we need Ben back or Lori back. I can't expect anything of Lori at this point. And Jen was fine, but, you know. And still does pretty well, though. Though Lori still kind of blows our one, but still. And she's not a terrible vocalist at all. I do think she does understand certain aspects, but here's the thing. From the opening track that I chose, well, here and there, it's kind of a botch situation. I kind of was trying to go for using Forsaken as my first track, Forsaken as an example. Though it kind of somehow went to a part of Energy. But anyway, the first track, just off of the sheer riffs alone, there's just something. It's clear that at this point, admittedly, the album could be considered as sort of a transitionary between what they were doing from the more industrial stuff to Alien Youth to the more symphonic style that they would do on a later particular album. But we'll get to that later. Forsaken starting off with just these super uber heavy stuff going on with it. Of course, most people just remember Savior off this, the only song it seems nowadays that the band will ever promote or talk about, and which is a shame. Savior is good, but it is not the best that this album has to offer, believe it or not. It's good for what it is, and it's still freaking rocks. For some reason I'm about to sneeze. Sorry. Forsaken just an amazing, just enough of amazing track, amazing riffage as well, just to give you enough of the idea of what you're getting yourself into. Corey's vocals really bringing it out, especially when he goes full sag. I can't do it right. I'm sorry. I'm not much of a screamer as I am, I'm not much for a harsh vocalist as I am a clean singer. Savior, Open Wounds. Now here's the thing about Open Wounds. It is not originally part of this album. This was part of the reissue, which is what I have. And of course, there's a bit of a slight track arrangement difference. Not entirely sure which is to be preferred. Though I can say I definitely enjoy this reissue a heck of a lot. And it definitely showcases itself. And Open Wounds essentially winds up being more about his estranged relationship with his father, or at least I want to say he kind of was his father basically kind of choice of discipline might not have been considered at the time the best either. I don't know what it was exactly, or it just seemed like they became more estranged, and it just seemed that certain things in his upbringing just was a bit rough, I guess. I don't know if I would call it tough love, I guess, from what I've gathered. I'd like to say that, I guess, well, not really like, but guessing that it was sort of abusive, but more in a seemingly more mentality thing, though it does, I understand if for some reason in places it comes across more like what most bands that were considered of this, more closer to what they were as nu metal on this particular album, in saying that they were open, like in that sort of whinage kind of a thing, but it works still lyrically as a song. And what helps, I guess, make the song a little bit better is the song that would proceed and show a sense of maturity in the band, even more so following this on the follow-up album. We'll get to that later. Then, of course, the track that initially would have preceded it, I believe, was A Little More. And that one, it's another single that was off this record. It was really solid. Definitely a good slow jam type thing. Good enough for if you, I guess for some reason, if you were decided to put it as a slow dance in a Amy Lee Seether Broken thing, but not nearly as whatever as that one was. This one's definitely just, concept of love, or God's love, the agape love, I guess, or at least it's more fulfillment compared to the worldly love, I guess, or at least God's love specifically. And that's another thing, my obsession, and then the track that comes up is probably one of the best tracks on here, at least the best written of them, and probably of most of this band's career, and that is, to me, My Obsession. Now, it weirdly works in a way that's intricately kind of works in a duality kind of way. Granted, its main intention is more so referring to that the only thing you should be obsessed with is more God, but there is a sense where that does come off as leading to a potential sense of zealousness. But it's more focusing on, but it also seems that there's a sense of the idea of, while in the lyrical content leading up to more of the chorus, or at least the attempt of trying to convey how just obsession does work and it can be all-consuming. I feel like I can just pull this out and I'll read that for you. Your touch, your leaves leave me dumb without reason. So in your love, my cage, my prison so pleasing, I spend my days tangled in thoughts of you, stuck in this place, resigned to be your fool. But yet the pre-chorus leading up to the chorus gives you this idea that's more referring to God than just, I guess, this one particular person, and to the extent that it comes across as more of a toxic relationship. So in a weird way, it kind of is a duality in that regard. I'm hoping that makes sense and I'm not like circling around too much. I'm sorry if it does seem to be that case. And especially, and it's just when it gets to the refrain where all of a sudden the riffing on this track just goes crazy. The to am I a lunatic? Am I going up to the point of where he starts, where John starts reading off the lines, am I a lunatic? Am I going crazy for just a word for just a touch from you? Before the riffs go. Exploding like chemicals, I'm going crazy, can't get enough. Just the idea, and just the riffing going into even the pre-chorus is even more interesting, and the vocal choices, or at least John's use of callback in comparison to what the band would do later on in later releases, unless you're referring to what Corey at least tried to help it do, and or at least with her vocal style, it still added a certain rawness to it when it came to that record. We'll get to that in a minute. But yes, and then following up, this title track is pretty good. Definitely a hint of things to come in the future for the band sound, in terms of their sonic template, or at least tonally speaking, with the use of the samples, like more electronic samples, and the more symphonic string arrangements. of course, while still leaning with the more industrial stuff that they had been doing over the past 2 releases or so, more industrial rock leaning. So it was more them transitioning from that to the more symphonic alt metal-y style. But before they could get quite to alt metal post grungy sound, before they can get to that, they kind of go into this more new metal post grunge sort of sound that kind of leans from the industrial rock style into the. And somehow this finds to be this nice little sweet spot when it comes to this band. Fingernails is just never reaching what I want to reach, never being who I want to be, blaming me when I fall and fail on my dreams splintering under my fingernails. I've had moments like this as well, and the riffing on it is really good as well. Even when it gets to the more so the verse riffs specifically, the imperfection is probably one of my favorites, and definitely kind of hits at how good Ben could eventually be in terms of lead work or sort of solo work, even though it's not perfect. But that's kind of even though it is sort of, but not really. It's kind of like I would comparatively what Devin Townsend on the last DTP album of Transcendence would do on Failure. That's kind of what I get out of what Cassia does on Imperfection with his solo, and and the lyrical content, just you can tell there's still a sense of sincerity here and just a genuine sense of it, and a sense of just realness to it that I just feel like the band's sense has not been able to, and the pure rawness of this record. And it shows, and that grit that does show in the production that really complements with what they're doing tonally. Which has a very Seven Dusty meets sort of kind of Mudvayne, almost bordering certain aspects of Slipknot's guitar tones. On the first record more so. I'm not sure about I've yet to hear Iowa, so I'm getting through all that, and when I get to talking about eventually that album for Slipknot down the line, you'll know what it is. Under My Skin's pretty good. Energy's pretty good. Cycle Down is a pretty good closer, even though, yes, it does seem it ends anticlimactically, but it still ends perfectly where it does. And like I say, once again, overall, you know it rocks. And which, of course, leads us to Skillet's Comatose. To me, my first exposure to this band, granted, my first exposure technically was through once back in the day when it was referred to as TVU, before it is now referred to as Radio TV and is just a shell of what it used to be. On this one channel, KTV apparently had them for a while, and they kind of did it more on certain days of the week, I guess, and had a long stretch period of time where it was kind of like that Christian MTV thing, and they played a lot of stuff, even the older stuff, and that includes more so this record. And the songs that really hit me and made me want to get interested in this band had been, of course, the track that you briefly heard in Rebirthing, and of course one of probably their best, even to the point of even haters like ARTV will admit to, in Whispers in the Dark. We can get to that in a minute, though. As Rebirthing, at first I didn't. It's more the symphonic elements and the vocals that pop out the most. But when you get a chance to actually hear the guitars, which I understand if they're kind of pushed in the back, which is fortunate a little bit, But the guitars just come roaring in. They're amazing. When you hear the guitars, they're actually really good. And I didn't really start to bother notice it as much until recently. Until like about a year and a half ago with my cousin and the band then. That's hopefully going to come back, but it'll probably be a slightly different incarnation of and a shell of what it used to be, but we'll see what happens with that. But yeah, this was definitely for this project, this is the band for the most part finally reaching a certain point in their career, transitioning, finally going more into being a more symphonic band. They still had some of the electronic elements. They still had keys and here and there. I feel as though the band, I didn't notice it until recently, having listened to other certain more progressive acts in metal per se that are slightly more lenient to more accessible sounding bands, I guess, and those bands being that of Dream Theater and more so Devin Townsend, which come on, John, at least admit that when it comes to this record, at least that you had a thing for them a little bit, sort of for I guess the follow-up Even Awake, which I feel like there were some missed opportunities there that should not have been missed there, because they just kind of dropped the ball. They fixed up on one thing, but then after that they've been but after Rebirthing, then the last night, which I believe was about this one, which was a song based around this one girl that his words are meant to be God speaking through him through this one little girl who was basically on the verge of suicide. And he basically kept her from basically killing herself. So through these words, which was amazing. Which just in that story in of itself is more just something to that. And that's what the last night was. A good choice of piano keys as well. The rest come more forward this time compared to Rebirthing. Of course, Yours to Hold is where it seems the band softens up a little bit, and yeah, it's probably the first time they ventured to being a little more closer, or at least more properly accessible without coming off too cheesy necessarily, in the form of Yours to Hold, which works even more so compared to or at least is a better follow-up idea from what A Little More tried to do, I guess. And also is one of the few songs I think they can transition from electric to acoustic, and it actually with more full band electric to more acoustic, more unplugged sound that works still. It's sort of this left song, even though I guess it has some slight hints that it's more of a love song, I'll be honest, than it has more to do with the big guy. So better though, that's definitely to be said with the follow-up track of Better Than Drugs, which has good lead tone and riffage on it, and that's what makes that song work the best. Even if it's not one of the stronger tracks, it's more the chorus that hits, and of course, like Rebirthing, that I forgot to mention, that does hold up, and you get to hear a lot of here that I definitely miss and wish a lot more of, which had happened following up with Awake, that we didn't get, and is even more of a bummer since Ben pretty much wound up leaving after that, and then Seth had to do what he had to do to prove that he could hang with whatever Ben set the groundwork for on an album like this in the form of that record. So, and then you have of course, the title track is a big staple of this band, and kind of similar to Rebirthing. I wouldn't say it's as strong of a song as Rebirthing. Rebirthing does have some almost Forsaken-esque elements to the lyrical content, more so. Better Than Drugs kind of has that feeling to where it's like, mostly in the sense that, why do I need drugs to feel high when I can feel high when all I can need is just just the power of your presence, God, or something. That's what Better Than Drugs was about. Comatose kind of sort of does the same thing as what Better Than Drugs did, but just not as, just tries to become across more like more closer to being weirdly this sort of a love, more of a lovey ballad, though sort of being kind of more of a song towards God as well. Not nearly as, but not nearly in the way that like Years to Hold is, I guess you could say. But the one track I've been wanting to kind of say since I was talking earlier about Collide, and that is The Older I Get. Lyrically the follow-up to what we got from Open Wounds, and makes Open Wounds a little even more worthwhile experience. Walls between you and I always pushing us apart, left and left, but scars fight after fight. The space between our common rage started growing shorter, disappearing slowly day after day. Just that. And of course, and it's just them going through this whole thing of just all the rage and hate between him and his dad that I've had, and then them finally coping with what has happened and trying to move forward into the future and focus on the present and let the past get to them or something. As he goes on to with lines like, "I'm sitting there waiting in my room for you, waiting for me to," and it makes me wonder, the older I get, will I get over it? It's been way too long for the times we missed. I didn't know that it would hurt like this, but I think the older I get, maybe I'll get over it. It's been way too long for the times we missed. I can't believe it still hurts like this. And yeah, that's just as the song goes along, and the lead guitar work that is brought about is really good as well. The follow-up, Those Nights is more of an anthem for, like, I guess those that have had those moments where you've just a sort of a reminiscent thing of certain aspects of what was the good of life in certain dark times for him, I guess. Falling Inside the Black is a song I actually appreciate a little bit more for what it is, and just how in this sort of darkest of times moment, trying to reach out to God in a way to try to get past just letting this darkness, the sin of this world, like, consume him, and something of that nature. Say Goodbye is just another ballady thing, kind of sort of in that same, more closer in a similar sense to Comatose and Years to Hold, though Years to Hold is probably the better of those three. Say Goodbye works. It's sappy enough, and I understand if that's considered a weak sauce, but we make up for it, as we say, with Whispers in the Dark, one of probably the better written songs, aside from My Obsession, I guess you could say. Despite the lies that you're making, your love is mine for the taking. Is just waiting to turn your tears to roses. I will be the one that's going to hold you. I will be the one that you run to. My love is a burning, consuming fire. No, you'll never be alone. When darkness comes, I'll light the night with stars. Hear my whispers in the dark. You'll never be alone. When darkness comes, you'll know I'm never far. Hear my whispers in the dark. You feel so lonely and ragged. You lay here broken and naked. My love is just waiting to clothe you in crimson roses. I will be the one that's going to find you. I will be the one that's going to guide you. Is a burning, consuming fire. Just him just stretching some sense of poeticism, I guess, at least for what John has to offer and what he's done. And the way it all comes about with just the way it has been composed and arranged, and just the lead work between Corey and Ben was just top notch. And then And then, of course, unfortunately, this album chose to kind of end with essentially a PSA, which I understand where some people will pick Collide over Comatose, which is what I'm going to do in the comment section. Which of these two albums do you prefer over the other? Collide or Comatose? Which you prefer? And it's a fine song. It's not a bad PSA for a PSA, though it works better within the context of the music video they did for it, as opposed to it being on the album, and as an album closer is kind of meh. In fact, I would rather prefer that they had done Whispers in the Dark, and if not that, and they stuck with this, I think what they should have done is had the bonus track actually been a part of this album ahead of time, which was Live Free or Let Me Die, and that would have been a better closer. Personally, I think. But, you know, and it's a pretty heavy type of song. Though I think even people who are more into Breaking Benjamin stuff, at least the early stuff, particularly on the second record, that's name I'm somehow escaping me, but whatever, just something along those lines. Think of it that way. And overall, as far as I'm concerned, that's my thoughts. As far as I'm concerned, this sonically is still one of the best Choices albums. And I eventually learned to listen to this during an Operation Overhaul thing during one of the people that was there had this album, this one specific, not just the deluxe edition. And I loved what I heard. I liked what they had. And I still jam out to this album. I'll admit I've kind of grown a little bit more towards what they did out of Collide than I had with Comatose, but either way, you can't really go wrong with any of these albums. So, what did you guys think of this pseudo-ish review of Collide and Comatose from Skillet? Leave a comment below, let me know. If you like this video, rock that like button with thrust if you must. Hit that subscribe button and also click that notification bell so you can get more updates. And I tend to usually forget about it for some reason, saying that. But anyways, as always, guys, and also, link in the description below to my Facebook page. Like and follow me there. And as always, guys, keep it random, keep it real, keep it rocking. I'll see you in the next video, whether or not it will be something involving Shmud on Rocks, or possibly, the new Slipknot record, even though I'll be like a week late or so by the time I decide to finally talk about it, because I'm trying to now at this point just deep dive into the rest of their discography before I go straight back into the album, just to kind of get a better basis of this record, so that is Be or Not Your Kind. But anyway, that's it. As always, guys, keep it random, keep it real, keep it rocking. I'll see you in the next video. Take care, y'all.